Now let's do a recap, walking through the formula on one string, and then we'll walk through the formula down what we call position number 1 across the strings. Then we'll do the same thing, but we will jump to each of the strings when we get to the step going from the 6th of the formula to the 7th of the formula. All right, so if we start on the 8th fret here, we're on the 8th fret on that C, and we're going to say that's going to be the 1st, which in our formula down here is the 1st. We're going to take a whole step with the capital W, so we're going to be on the 1st up top, noting that the 1st here is going to be at the top of what I call the box or the house. I call this the major scale house, which is at the penthouse looking up towards the hole here, which I'm calling the ocean. And then we're going to be taking a whole step going from C to D. So notice what shape that we have here. We've got the box, what I call the box double stop, the D, which represents the Dorian. So now we're at the Dorian, going from what we could call the Ionian position, top right penthouse of the house, to the Dorian position, the 1st to the 2nd. That's what I'm going to call absolute mode number 2, which is now at the top of the double stop right above the Mixolydian. So they're in like their own little flat here, the Dorian and the Mixolydian. So now let's go from so let's also just think about this from a second. So that step is what we would call a whole step. We can also call it a 2-note away, which would be basically a major second away from the C. All right, now let's go from the 2nd to the 3rd. So we're going to go, it's going to be a whole step from the 2nd of the major scale or Ionian mode to the 3rd of the major scale or Ionian mode, going from this D to the E. And if I look at that from a modal standpoint, we're going from the absolute mode number 2, the Dorian, to absolute mode number 3, which is the Phrygian. So whenever we go from the Dorian to the Phrygian, then that's going to basically be, that's always going to be a whole step when I look at it from going from the 1st of the Dorian to the 1st of the Phrygian. The Phrygian, as we can see, is now located. It's kind of hard to see. It's like, what shape is that? You can see it down here because it repeats at the bottom. That's the bottom part of what the house is, right? It's just like this house shape. That bottom part of the house is right there. So that's what I call in the basement, the Phrygian being a minor mode, kind of like the metal mode, you might call it, because it has that kind of heavy second to it, flat second. So there's going to be that one. And if I look at, so from what would I compare that E to the C, that's going to be the 4th, a 4-note away major 3rd from the C. So notice when we go through the formula, I'm looking at half steps, but I can also compare it from an interval standpoint to the 1st position or to any other note I want to, but typically to the 1st position, which would be a 4-note away major 3rd from the 1st position. This repeats because the string goes around in a circle, so I can take that same note, different octave on the open E string. And so if we go then from what we can call the 3rd to the 4th, that's going to be a half step with the little h. And so we go from the E to the F. So we have the open E to the F. And we're going to say, what is that from a modal standpoint? Absolute mode number 3, Phrygian, to absolute mode number 4, the Lydian. So that move, we can think of it, will always be the same if I'm going from position 1 of the Phrygian to position 1 of the Lydian. If you think about it from that perspective, then that's always going to be where that half step, that's where the half step is going to be. Noting that this F here, once again, is the same as this house shape. You can see it down here because this is the bottom of the house shape. So it's what I call the bottom of the major scales penthouse. It's still a major, so it still has that nice view, or at least it's pointing towards the ocean, but it's not in the penthouse on the upper side. The minors are at the back with the Locrian up in the attic, and then the minors in the basement, rocking out in the basement, right? And so then we're going to say, okay, then we're going to go from from here to here. We're going to go from the 4th to the 5th, from the 4th to the 5th is going to be a whole step. Going from the 4th to the 5th is a whole step. The the fourth of the major scale to the fifth of the major scale is a whole step, bringing us to the G. If I look at it this way, we're going from absolute mode number 4 to absolute mode number 5. In other words, Lydian to Mixolydian. You can see the Mixolydian is going to be here. If I look at it from this position, you can call it the house double stop, right? So it's the bottom of the double stop. The Mixolydian being the major mode, kind of like the bluesy mode that's not in the major's house, because it's like, I'm out of here, I'm the bluesy mode, I'm going to do my own thing, and it's hanging with Dorian on the top here, right? Which is the same here, but you can't see the top because we're on the top string. So then if we go to the next one, we're going from the 5th of the major scale to the 6th of the major scale is a whole step. So 5th to the 6th is a whole step. 5th to the 6th is going to be a whole step here. If we look at it from a modal standpoint, we're going from absolute mode number 5, Mixolydian, to absolute mode number 6, which is the Aeolian, which could also be called the minor scale, right? That's the minor scale mode. And where is it located? Well, if you see it this way, from the double stop house position, it's going to be at the top of the double stop. And underneath it is the Dorian. By the way, if you looked at it back the other way, then it would be part of the hamburger, this shape, which is part of the meat of the hamburger, or the one string shape going behind it. Okay, so that's going to be that one. And then if I go from so then we're going to go a whole step from the 6 to the 7 is a whole step. So from the 6 to the 7 is a whole step. So now we want a whole step from what I would call relative or absolute position number 6, or mode number 6, Aeolian or minor scale, to absolute mode number 7, which is going to be the Locrian. And so where's the Locrian located? It's at the top of the house. It's in what I would call the attic of the house, because the Locrian's the one that people don't play that much. So it's the one that has the diminished. You can see the flat 5. That's why you get that tensiony note, the flat 5 with the Locrian, from the B to the F. And then we go from the 7 to the 8, which is going to be our half step going home. Whoops, hold on. 7 to 8, or 7 to 1, going back around the top. It's going to be a half step bringing us back to the C. There's that. Let's do it again. But now let's go through our shape in position 1, going across the strings, trying to recognize when I would go down. Now, of course, here I know I'm in position 1, so I know just by shape when I would go down, right? But I want to look at it not by shape. I want to be able to see the formula. So if I'm looking at it by formula, what is happening here? Well, we went from the 1st to the 2nd is a whole step again. So the 1st to the 2nd is a whole step, going from here but not out to here, instead down to here. Why is that a whole step? Because it's going from pinky to pointer. That's one way you can think of it. In other words, it's going 4 frets back, down a string 4 frets back. That's always going to be the whole step. If I count it out, I know that there's a distance between 2 strings of 5 notes, unless you're crossing the fault line, in which case it's 4. So 5, and then 4, 3, 2. So 2 note away, major second, or in other words, whole step back. All right, so that takes us to the D. Now notice that D, if I go down here, it's going from absolute mode number 1 to absolute mode number 2, or in other words, Ionian, major scale, to Dorian. So, and I can see that the Dorian, a minor mode, now lives in the double stop house shape. So it's not in the house because it's a minor mode, and it's not in the basement down here like Phrygian is. It moved out and it's hanging with the Aeolian or minor scale above it in the little flat over here. All right, and so if I compare this D to the C, what's the distance there? That D is a 2 note away major second, which I can count out by just the same thing, 5, 4, 3, 2. Let's go from the 2 to the 3. 2 to the 3 is going to be a whole step. So we're going from 2 to the 3, 2 of the major scale to the 3 of the major scale, which from a modal standpoint is going from absolute mode number 2, Dorian, to absolute mode number 3, Phrygian. Phrygian is a minor mode, kind of like the rock mode, that has that distinctive flat second to it. That's why it's in the box. and it's going to be in what I call the basement of the box because the rocker is in the basement doing its own thing. Everybody makes fun of him, but he's like, whatever. He's actually a rock star in the basement doing his thing. So you can, whatever, dude. And then like, so then we're going to say, then we're at, we go from the 3 to the 4. So we're going to go from the 3 to the 4 is a half step from 3 to the 4. And that would be from a modal standpoint, going from absolute mode number 3, Phrygian, to absolute mode number 4, Lydian. Lydian is a major mode. It's still in what I would call the house, but it's a major mode, so it gets a nice one that's at least looking towards the ocean, although it's not in the penthouse with the major scale looking at the ocean. And so then we can bring that back on over here. So I'm going to bring that here. So now we're going to go from 3. Now we're going to go from 4 to 5. So 4 to 5. So that's going to be a whole step. So you would think it would go out here if I was going on the same string. But no, I want to be within this shape. So I'm going to pull it back here. And look at that distance. It's a whole step because it's from pinky to pointer. Pinky to pointer is a whole step. And we know that because it's a distance of 5 between the strings. 5, 4, 3, 2. 2 note away, which would be a 2 note away major second or a whole step if you want to think about it that way. So now we're going from the 4 to the 5, which is going from absolute mode number 4 Lydian to absolute mode number 5 Mixolydian. The Mixolydian, we can see if we look at it from this perspective, it's in what I call the meat of the hamburger, the one string shape, which is if we look at it from a pentatonic, there's your hamburger, there's the meat of the hamburger. By the way, if you were looking at it back the other way, it would be going this way. It'd be part of the house double stop shape. So from this perspective, looking back, it's hanging in the flat or in the flat with the, or the 2-story complex with the with the Dorian on top. If you look at it going forward, you're looking at the shape where it's hanging with the minor mode, otherwise known as our Aeolian mode minor scale. All right, and then if we go from the 5th to the 6th, we're going to go from the 5th to the 6th. Ba-boom. Let's do it this way first. Wait a sec. 5th to 6th is a whole step. 5th to the 6th is a whole step. So now we're going from absolute mode number 5, Mixolydian, to absolute mode number 6, Aeolian, which is also known as the minor scale. So the minor scale, where is it located? Well, if I look back in the shape, it's in the meat of the hamburger, right? If I look forward, I would think of it as this shape. It's in the double stops part of the double stop square shape, right? All right, and notice that it's a 9 note away major 6 from the C, by the way. If I go from that C to that A, how can I check that 9 notes away? Because it would be 5, 10, 9. Okay, and then we're going to go from the 6 to the 7 is going to be a whole step. Now I could go out here, but that's outside my shape, so I'm going to go back here. Once again, it's pinky to pointer. I didn't really leave off on my pinky, but I'm going to replace my pinky so I can see the shape. Pinky to pointer. Going to the B, I know that's a whole step because it's 2 notes away, which is 5 distance here, 4, 3, 2. So there it is there. We're going from the absolute mode number 6, Aeolian or minor scale, to absolute mode number 7, the Locrian. Absolute mode number 7 is at the top of what I would call the house. Here's the house. It's at the top. House looks funny because this tectonic plate that shifted to the right due to the fault line between string G and B, but it's still at the top right of the house from that perspective. Notice the shape is the same here. If I look at it, it's either house double stop or double stop house, right? If I look at it forward, it's still those 4, the double stop or house double stop house, right? Same here, house except the shift in the string, house double stop house, house double stop. And then of course, and we know that one is an 11 note away major 7 from the C, by the way. Oops, that's not right. That tensiony sound. How do I know it's 11 notes away? I can count it out. It's going to be 5, 10, 15, only 12 notes in the musical alphabet. 15 minus 12 is 3, 2, 1, 0, or octave. And then if I go around the horn, 12 minus 1 is 11, right? And then we're going to go, of course, from the 7 to the 8 or 1, which is going to be a half step. 7 to the 8 or 1. So it goes from the 7, which is the absolute mode number 7, Locrian, to 8 or 1, the Ionian, back to home base here. Okay, now let's do the same thing, but I'm going to focus in on this change going from the 6 to the 7. And when I get to that, I'm going to jump to each of the other strings. So I'm going to walk through this as though I'm going to stay in this shape, but then at any of the intervals from one step to the next is either going to be a whole step, like this one, or a half step. And that means if I know the interval of a whole step or a half step, and I know which step I'm on, then I can jump to any string I want, and use that. It'll be a different octave, but I can use the same